Reading any one of these books will make you a better GM. The Men's Warehouse guy guarantees it.
I guarantee it.
And the best part is, the information from these books is all available for free. I'm gonna go over 5 tips from each of these books and show you where to get the rest of the information for free. Wait, is this a listicle inside of another listicle? Oh no. It's too powerful. Oh wait, no, it's totally fine. I'm also going to show you how the sponsor of today's video, Improved Initiative, can help you run a theater of operations, and I'll explain what that is in a bit. Welcome to the table. I'm Kelly, and this is the 69th long-form video on the channel, so you know what that means. The next one's going to be number 70. Also, 69. Anyways, So You Want to Be a Game Master by Justin Alexander is an excellent book. Not everything resonated with me and my playstyle, but the thing with all these books is that they're so jam-packed with little bits of wisdom that I think no matter your GM style, how long you've been GMing for, or the system you play, you will get something out of them. The biggest aha moment for me came from this line: an RPG is ultimately a conversation of meaningful choices, which seems totally obvious, but the keyword here is meaningful. Justin goes into much more depth throughout the book about what makes a meaningful choice, but it boils down to this: the players have to have enough information and context to understand, or at least mostly understand, the outcomes of their choice. That choice has to impact what they're trying to do, what their intention is, and the choice can't merely be a calculation. If the players are trying to get to a nearby city and you ask them if they want to take the main road or go through the forest, and the only difference is the main road is faster, then that's a calculation. You might as well just cut straight to the city. One of my favorite tips from the book is to give players opposing adventure hooks. For example, a thieves guild is trying to hire the party to assassinate a noble, but separately, the noble has caught wind of an assassination plot against them and wants to hire the party to protect them. If the rewards are different but equal in value, the party now has to decide the fate of this noble. They have context, and assuming this noble is tied into the story, then it also affects their intention. And the rewards are different but equal, so it's not merely a calculation. And it has the added bonus of being an inflection point where they have to make an active choice. Passively following the story isn't an option. That's a hugely meaningful choice that you've created out of 2 one-sentence plot hooks. Deciding to go left or right in a dungeon intersection is a choice, but without any information or context about the pros and cons of each direction, it's not a meaningful choice, it's a coin flip. Which leads me to the next tip: give the players enough information so they can formulate plans. In the book, Justin wrote about this in the context of heists, but this applies to all facets of TTRPGs. You can't make a meaningful choice if you don't have information. During heists, you can make sure there are windows in the enemy base. Something as simple as your PCs being able to figure out a rough layout will allow them to make a plan. And making a plan and then executing it is so much more fun than just going in blind every time. Being liberal with information also means giving players information about the monsters they're fighting. I've been playing through Baldur's Gate with some friends, and in BG3, there's an examine function. It lets you look at the stat block of any monster or person. Handing over the monster stat blocks to your players just isn't something you do in D&D because it feels like it would ruin the game, but in BG3 it doesn't ruin it at all. It adds another puzzle element where you're trying to figure out the best abilities to use against certain creatures and which characters would be best suited to target which creatures. I haven't tried fully handing out monster stat blocks to my players, but I am gonna try it. I imagine I'll land somewhere in the middle though, like allowing them to make a free check on their turn to glean one piece of information from the stat block. But this is a specific example. The bigger idea is give your players access to lots of information. Secrets are fun, but if everything's a secret, then they're just stumbling around in the dark and they can't make meaningful choices. But how do you give them this information? If they're scoping out a location, do you just have them make perception check after perception check?
Oh, try again. Try again.
No, that's super boring. An excellent little tidbit from the book is to come up with a list of clues or pieces of information you want to give your players, and then look at the skill list on their character sheet. Now just go through the skill list and attach each clue to a different skill. Thinking of how each of those clues could be discovered using that skill can lead to much more creative checks, and using a variety of skills will let different players in the party shine. Of course, you don't have to stick to this list. If a player comes up with something creative during the session, definitely reward them with some information. But this just gives you something to fall back on. Once the PCs get into doing the heist or the raid or anything in a location, you can make the whole location feel more alive by running what Justin calls the theater of operations. And you can do that really easily with the sponsor of today's video, Improved Initiative. For those who don't know, Improved Initiative is a tool for running combat. It can track initiative, track monster and player character HP, and instantly roll attacks and damage. But how does this relate to the theater of operations? And also, what is a theater of operations?
What the hell is even that?
Justin uses the term theater of operations to describe all the monsters or people in a location. And rather than thinking of each room as its own isolated encounter, think of what might be going on in adjacent areas and how they might react to a fight breaking out in one area or a dead body being found in another. Instead of confining action to one area of a map, let that action stretch out to surrounding areas to make encounters more interesting. If a fight breaks out in one room, maybe the skeletons in the next room hear. They open the door and start firing into the room. Now the PCs will need to either go into that room or close the door. Maybe the thug tackles one of the PCs through a window into the courtyard. Now a mage on the roof starts firing down on them. But how do you prep and track all these monsters so that you can have them dynamically enter an encounter? In Improved Initiative, you can prep and save encounters. So you can create an encounter and save it as 2 thugs in the library, then create the 3 skeletons encounter, then the mage on the roof. Now just add your PCs to the encounter. When they get into combat, just go to your saved encounters, click the appropriate encounter, and it adds those monsters. Then when other monster groups get involved, just click the appropriate group and it adds those monsters to the existing encounter. This is super powerful because it allows you to prep a whole location at once, which means you don't need to pause combat to flip through books or search in the library to add new monsters. Just one click and the new monsters join the fight. Constantly looking for opportunities to open up a battlefield or change the circumstances of a fight will also make your combat encounters that much more dynamic and fun. Oh, and did I mention Improved Initiative is free? So head to the link down below to check it out and start running your location as one cohesive living place rather than a series of closed off rooms. Before we dive into the most helpful TTRPG book I've ever read, I need to tell you how to get all this information and more for free. These 3 books all have something in common. They're all blogs that were turned into books. They're books.
You can't take 2 words and make them into one stupider word, Randy.
Well, Bob, now you're not invited to the Bloomier.
I've linked all 3 blogs down below, so if you don't want to pick up the book, you can read all the same information for free. I'm really glad I did pick up the books though. I found they're really well organized, and I absorb information much better in that format. Alright, let's get on to the most helpful TTRPG book I've read so far, and that is The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master by Michael Shea, aka Sly Flourish. The first tip from this book is one that everyone knows, but not many people actually meaningfully put into action, including myself. Every time you prep, the first thing you should do is to review your PC's character sheets, backstories, and their recent actions. But you may say, I already know what they are. Dave's a bard, Katie's a barbarian, and Alex is a sorcerer 2, cleric 3, fighter 1, rogue 1, multiclass. Why do I need to review that? Reviewing your PC's character sheets not only makes you familiar with each of their abilities so that you can plan encounters that let each of your players shine and use their super cool, obscure, one-time features, but it also makes sure you're framing your prep and the game around your players. Your PCs are the heroes of the story. They're the main characters, and everything should revolve around them. Yes, stuff should happen in the background to make the world feel alive, but the most important things to prep are what your players and their characters are most interested in. It does feel redundant to review them every time, but I find that it grounds and focuses my prep and helps me figure out exactly how to use my time most effectively. Before we talk about the thing that's helped to grab my players' attention, I want to share a tip about pacing that I hadn't considered before that might be causing problems in your campaigns. The obvious tip about pacing is to balance action scenes with relaxed scenes, but the less obvious and equally impactful tip is about balancing hope scenes with fear scenes. A hope scene is where the players get a win. They handily win an encounter, they discover an enemy's weakness, they thwart a major plot, or they gain a new ally. A fear scene is one where they have to flee an encounter or almost don't survive. They see the aftermath of something terrible the BBEG has done, an ally betrays them, or something like that. Balancing the emotional beats is just as important as balancing the action beats. Too many fear beats and the players will feel hopeless. Too many hope beats and they'll feel like there aren't any stakes. If your world is more grim and dark, you can certainly lean towards hopelessness, but if the players start to feel fully hopeless, then they'll disengage. So don't forget to give out wins to balance out the betrayals. You all awake in the night to inky tendrils slithering up your arms and legs and the sound of coughing and choking as you gasp for air. what do you do? Starting your sessions in medias res, in the middle of the action, grabs everyone's attention and gets them making decisions as quickly as possible. Definitely don't ambush your players during every long rest, that'll get old very quickly, but finding any opportunity to start the session right in the action will help engage your players. That doesn't have to be combat either, it can be as simple as cutting to the next meaningful choice. You arrive at Lord Barrington's estate and are welcomed in. What do you do? Reducing the amount of time between the start of the session and the question, what do you do, will hook your players. Another thing that'll hook your players is to make sure they feel like their decisions matter and they're not wasting their time. One way to do that is to give them clues or information that helps them further the main plot wherever they go. But how can you anticipate everywhere they could possibly go? You don't. Just make a list of clues or information that'll help them move the main plot along, and make sure those clues aren't tied to a location. Then, whenever the PCs go somewhere, give them a clue as a reward. Maybe it's a rumor someone heard or a scrap of a correspondence. Putting actionable information anywhere they go means they'll always feel like whatever they're doing is worthwhile. But how do you flesh out a location on the fly if the players go somewhere you don't expect?
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Well, a big part of building out a location is to fill it with NPCs. And a great tip from the book that makes coming up with fleshed out NPCs on the fly easy is to use fictional characters that you're already familiar with. The Goblin is Patrick from SpongeBob. The Tavern Keeper is Bob from Bob's Burgers. The BBEG is Dr. Evil. Okay, maybe don't do that one. Or maybe do. Just give them a fantasy name and a different voice and no one will ever know. And if someone guesses it, deny, deny, deny. You've never seen that movie. In fact, you've never even heard of a movie or a television.
Am I saying that right?
Before we talk about the third book and how incorporating its advice got rid of combat slog for me, the last tip from the Lazy DM that really resonated with me was to make locations more fantastical. It's actually not explicitly written in the book, but one of the key prep stages that Mike writes about is to prep fantastic locations. I sometimes get caught in the trap of trying to explain to myself why something is a certain way in my world. That can be helpful sometimes because it can help you flesh out a world, but it can also hamstring you and make you create really boring worlds. Like, why would the villagers build their tavern into a massive tree? It would be way more difficult and there's no good reason for it. Because it's cool and this world exists in our imaginations. Why not go visit places that physically can't exist in our world? Why is it this way? I don't know. Magic. Or, I don't know, an ancient civilization built it. Why shouldn't the city have an observatory that's built in a tower so tall it reaches above the clouds? Why shouldn't there be a pirate captain with a ship so large it houses the population of a city? Why shouldn't all the villagers of this town turn into goat people on the eve of the winter solstice? I challenge you, next time you need to prep a location, make it fantastic and don't worry about explaining it. Better yet, ask your players to explain why it's like this. By the way, if you want some easy locations to drop into your games, I've started doing something called Snap Settings over on my Patreon. There are only a couple right now, but I intend to keep making more. They're little one-page locations that have fun challenges or flavor that you can drop into any session without prep. If your PCs go somewhere unexpected, you can drop one of these in their path and make it seem like you planned it the whole time. Alright, enough having our head in the clouds and talking about imagination and all that crap. Let's talk about how these real goblins are going to behave in combat with their real bugbear allies, okay? Actually though, reading The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Ammann has helped my combat encounters immensely. The whole book is helpful, but honestly the most helpful piece of advice comes right in the introduction. And that is, the monsters and NPCs in your world all have wants and needs, and what they want or need determines the way they behave in combat. The whole book is a reference book of different monster types and tactics for how they might behave in combat. But the real thing that the book teaches you is how to look at a stat block and convert a monster's stats and abilities into realistic behaviors. A monster with a ranged weapon, low HP, and high dexterity is going to try and ambush its targets. A monster with low intelligence, high strength, and a big HP pool is going to smash the thing that just poked it last. These are obvious examples, but the more you read examples throughout the book, the more you learn to read the language of stat block. The first and potentially most important thing to determine is at what point does this creature flee or surrender? No creature wants to die, aside from a fanatic, a construct, or something that's been possessed, but mostly no creature wants to die. So there's almost no reason that a combat encounter should end by painstakingly finishing off each minion, unless that's something your players want to do. Determining a creature's motivation will help you determine how long they'll stay in the fight. Is it a beast protecting its young? That beast may fight to the death. Is it a beast looking for its next meal? As soon as it takes any substantial damage, it's gonna flee and look for an easier meal. The same goes for bodyguards. Are they hired swords? Well, they're probably not sticking around. Are they devoted followers bound by honor? Well, they might only surrender when defeat is absolutely certain. I did have reservations when I picked up this book. Some of my players don't like strategic tactical combat, so I thought if I made my monsters more tactical, it would punish them. But in fact, it's made combat encounters way more fun. You may have to tune down your encounters a bit if you're using your monsters more effectively, but having the monsters use tactics forces the PCs to move around more and think more strategically, even if they're just reacting to what the monsters are doing. Being able to keep the book next to me or make notes of the tactics has made it easy to remind myself during combat what each monster should be doing on their turn, and it stopped any combat encounters from ending up as a dog pile where we just trade blows. The other benefit is, once you start becoming aware of these tactics, you start thinking about which monster types might complement each other in combat, and then you can really start to take your encounters to the next level. Did any of these tips resonate with you? Do you have any more to share? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want some more GM tips, check out this video here for everything I've learned from GMing over the last 7 years, and also to see a cool tree. I appreciate you.